I wanted to go through one of the more common ones, and I'm sure I'll bring it up again. It's called accidental adversaries, and this is a very common system pattern, and I'm going to lay it out here on using a piece of software I use. But in structured systems thinking, we display these system patterns in feedback loops. That is the unit of measure and description that we use. And in future ones, I might go through all these symbols, but it's fairly easy to read if you think about it. It's got the terms are the types of things that are going on in the system, and the arrows show the causal connection. Remember, it's basically managers' confidence in meeting objectives. You follow the arrow, that leads to collaboration with teams. These symbols on the arrow tell you logically, as one thing increases, what happens to the next thing in the causal chain. And a positive sign means that it moves in the same direction. So if managers' confidence in meeting increases, collaboration with teams increases. If managers' confidence in meetings decreases, collaboration with teams decreases. It's a little confusing at times because people are like, well, it went down, but think of positive as same, right? What happened in the antecedent or the previous one will be the same dynamic in the later one. And we assemble these feedback loops to show how relationships feedback on themselves. This is the part, the nonlinear part that's missing from, if you've done process improvement, I've done a ton of lean, a ton of Six Sigma, a ton of agile, they don't make these feedback loops explicit, and that's the part that's missing for a complex system. So we talk about structured systems thinking as being the tools for everything not covered by the process mapping. So this feedback loop is the what I would call the virtuous feedback loop of axonal adversaries. It's what we want to have happen. And it begins with, this is when you take a team and you're putting them remote. You got to move your workforce to remote work, and you haven't done it before. So managers have this need to be confident in meeting their objective. If they're confident, they'll collaborate more with their teams. The collaboration will reinforce team confidence in management, so the team will be supportive in innovating remote management tools, methods, different ways of doing work. So, and as we innovate more in remote manager meetings remote work, the managers get more confidence in meeting their things. This is a positive feedback loop. As long as one of them's going up, they're all going up, and we call this a virtuous loop. This is the aspirational behavior. This is what we want, right? This isn't shocking to anyone. This isn't surprising. The whole point of a system pattern is its component parts are fairly self-explanatory. It's when you begin combining them that the complexity emerges. So this is what everyone wants, the virtuous relationship of managers who are confident, working with their employees to develop innovative ways to work from home and work remote. Happy days. Well, of course, things happen, right? So the first thing that happens is business demands from the pandemic, right? There's a pandemic on, or our business is collapsing. This introduces stress to managers. And so this little negative sign means as the previous one increases, the next one goes and decreases. Think of negative as opposites, right? So as business demands increase, managers' confidence in meeting objectives decrease. It's opposite. And as managers' confidence in meeting objectives decrease, their desire for control increases. Again, it's a negative sign. And as their desire for control increases, their confidence, and they implement things to create control, their confidence increases. Again, this is simplistic. This isn't going to capture all managers, but we're looking now at a system dynamic that's broadly speaking across a manager. And I put this in red because this is creating what's called the vicious pattern. So the virtuous pattern is the green outside, but we've now had a pressure introduced on the business demands that creates this internal dynamic that's vicious. And as the desire for control comes up, what managers begin doing is violating what I call work from home norms, right? There's certain things that make work from home great that if your manager's constantly checking in on you, assigning lots of busy work just to make sure that you're busy, they can't see you, so they don't know what you're doing. That's the reality of work from home. And if you've I've worked from home for 15 years when I wasn't on a client site. These things sort of fade in the background, but when you're a new manager, that lack of visible control leads you to do things that violate the kind of benefits from work from homes that make it effective. And as you violate the work from home norms, you reduce the team confidence in management, right? So again, it's a negative sign. So as desire for control goes up, positive sign, the violation of work from home norms goes up. As the violation of work from home norms goes up, the team confidence declines. So think about, because remember, these outer loops are still going on. As team confidence declines, It's a positive sign, so same. As team confidence declines, their willingness to innovate declines. As managers' confidence in meeting objectives declines, their collaboration with teams declines. So even as this vicious behavior emerges in the center, it's weakening the virtuous loop on the outside of the dynamic. And of course, when team confidence in the management declines, they react by wanting to retain those benefits of working from home, the feeling of independence, the feeling of teamwork, the feeling of being able to set your own schedule and have a little bit of flexibility. And let's be clear, there's external demands on the team members as well, because it's a pandemic for them as well. They've got relatives, they've got children, they've got worries about school, they've got existential feelings of dread that 2020 is the Mayan apocalypse we all thought was coming in 2012, delayed by, I mean, it's a pandemic, right? It's a very tense time. And if we don't account for that, you know, managers are thinking, well, I'm just trying to meet the business objectives, but your team's also living with the external demands of what's causing pressure from them. And so the reaction to this creates this next part of the vicious feedback loop where they desire to retain their benefits of work from home, and they begin violating the control measures, right? And these violations aren't necessarily twist the mustache, conspiracy, we're going to sabotage. They could be inadvertent, they could be unintentional, they could be unconscious. But what happens is you've now created an internal vicious feedback loop where you have this violation of norming behavior that's going on between managers who are motivated to feel more confident that they're going to meet objectives, so they're implementing procedures and processes and steps, and the team reaction is reacting to that. Again, they may not realize it, but they're reacting to it by sort of violating the control measures, which decreases the manager's confidence. And what happens is you get this kind of feedback loop on the inside that's a vicious feedback loop. And as this feedback loop strengthens, it's always weakening the external. So this combined dynamic is called the axonal adversaries. And it's actually going on at all times. There's no time that it's perfect and no one is violating norms, but the way you can think about this from a structured systems thinking way is which loop is dominant, which loop is currently in control of the system. Are we stronger in the outside one where our confidence and collaboration and innovation are keeping us doing well and practicing that virtuous partnership loop? Or are we violating each other's norms and kind of like getting snippy at each other and sort of reluctant to engage and like, please put that in an email, or as per my previous email, you know, that kind of behavior? Part of structured systems thinking is that a lot of the secret sauce is recognizing a system when you're in it. And that's hard because you're in that ship on the ocean with everything changing, to pause and say, wait a minute, is this storm an axonal adversary storm? Because just as this explains the problem, it also gives us an insight in how to begin solving it. Think about this. We know that as team collaboration increases, team confidence increases, and as innovation and remote management and works and practices and tools increase, managers' confidence increases. So the more we can reinforce this external loop, the more it will damp the internal set of loops. And you can do this through a variety of ways. We do an entire series on collaboration using systems thinking to help people understand, you know, stand up, you know, you have not just meetings for meeting's sakes, but collaboration where you reassert why you're in this together, right? We're all working for the same company. We all want the same goal, and we all live in the same pandemic. So part of the effort of shifting to this external loop is reinforcing the reasons why you're working together in the first place. This could, and it's not just thump the table and, you know, repeat the mission. It's an honest dialogue. And the point of that is to get away from these violations. The more that people focus on the last violation that happened, the last norm that was breached, the more it will create this vicious feedback cycle that will just spiral it out of control. So there's a whole host of collaboration tools, but I wanted to show this axonal adversaries because I see it and I hear it in all sorts of companies coming up. And it's broadly speaking between the managers that are trying to manage remote workforces where they've never had to do it before, and the employees that are finding the benefits of remote work environments. But what's interesting is that it's not just limited to this particular situation. One of the benefits of structured systems thinking is that these system patterns are ubiquitous. So the axonal adversaries system archetype all you have to do is change those names, those words on the loops, but the structure of that system stays the same. I was working with the Marine Corps last year, and we had clearly, you have a civilian population, civilian government employees, and you have a green suiter population of Marines and, you know, active duty military. They have two different cultures, very different cultures. You have a Marine culture and you have a government civilian employee. They have different lives. The Marines are Marines. The government employees are employees. They have how they view the workday, how they view mission essential. And what was happening is these two groups were inadvertently violating each other's social norms. The Marines were focused on mission. So it doesn't matter if it's 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, I'm calling you, something's going to happen, because they're used to a 24/7 environment where you can order someone to do something. But civilian workers are like, hey, it was 5 o'clock, right? My day's over. You're interrupting my evening. That's one violation of the norm. But another violation of the norm is the civilians are used to building capabilities. You know, they're like, if you have a complex ask we need to build the capability. Whereas Marines are like, we're just going to get it done. We're going to get it fixed. We're going to adapt and overcome. And so the Marines were asking for things that civilians didn't have capabilities to do. And the civilians are saying, we need to build those capabilities. The Marines heard, well, you just don't want to do it. And what happened is the loop dominance shifted from the aspirational partnership to the vicious adversarial. And we were in a workshop when we were describing this. I drew it on the board and a Marine stood up and started knife handing the air, and he goes, that's what I live. That's my life every day. That's what I experience every day. And this leads to the third power of the system archetypes and why I want to use them, right? The first one is to understand a system. The second is to help navigate out. But the third is to create a sort of name, a vocabulary, grammar, a syntax, a way of describing situations we all experience every day that are complex, they're dynamic, but we recognize them when we see them, because what happened is within a week, everyone in the Marine Corps, in that area, at least that command, was talking about Axonal adversaries. They're bringing it up in meeting. Are like, are we getting in an Axonal adversary situation, or which loop are we in? And it's kind of funny because it's new and they're making jokes, but they would recognize the complex dynamics they were in. And that's the key of using some of these tools, is to recognize when these things occur so that you can identify and navigate your way out of it. Yeah, Jennifer's saying I haven't, amazing modeling tool. Yeah, it's been around. If you've ever read The Fifth Discipline or heard of that, Peter Senge, that's where they're introduced. And the system dynamics field has been around for 30 years, but they're not well known. Yeah, and if management can be honest about what's happening in the virtuous green and vicious red loops, more solution tools can open up. Managers that only focus on trying to force more of the green loops while blatantly ignoring red vicious loops, or only focus on hammering negative issues without strength. So that's a really good insight. So part of the use of these tools, these models, is to make what's invisible explicit, right? There's no, you can't walk through a building and follow a green loop on the floor. You know, you don't see a red loop connecting people. Maybe if you were in a computer game, that would be interesting. But, you know, in reality, these things are invisible. So the point of these models is to make what's invisible explicit and give it a term that we can discuss. And you had a really good insight there, Jennifer, that you often have, because these loops are constantly going on, you could have the problem where everyone's like, everything's fine here, we're just all partnership and innovation good, and they're ignoring that building problem. And again, you know, the definition of a threshold effect is when you have a system that has a switch of loop dominance, and you can be accumulating those red loops, but the green loop is still dominant, but you're accumulating until you hit a threshold point, and then the system switches, and the loop dominance switches from the green to the red, and all of a sudden you have this nasty cascade effect that you're like, where did that come from? Well, that's the challenge of complex systems. When they hit those pivot points and threshold points, they can switch fast. Appreciate your time today. If you have any questions on structured systems thinking, have a problem you'd like our help on, or want to know more about developing your own capabilities in systems thinking, please reach out at the email below. We'd love to hear from you. If you're interested in what we do and want to follow our journey, I've added our LinkedIn and Twitter information. And we plan to regularly update this channel with quick tips and case studies to help you get the most out of your systems thinking and lean efforts. If you want to be notified whenever we add new video content, please consider subscribing to this channel by clicking on the red subscribe button below this video.